Hey guys, it's Cody. I'm on day 101 of the Odin project, and on Monday I showed you guys the flavor wheel that I built, and I also showed you a little bit of how I was going to allow the user to upload their own sensory lexicon with an import feature. Well, I've been working on that import feature for the past 2 days, and I'm going to show you guys what I've done with that. Before we do that though, for those of you who are new to the channel, a couple codes is mine and my wife's journey into web development. So me and Emily are keeping track of our progress through the Odin project with these vlogs and also weekly updates. The vlogs are me and her individually, and then the weekly updates are us coming together and reflecting on our week. So if you're interested in following our journey, then subscribe. All right, let's take a look at what exactly I did over the past couple of days. So I'm a little fuzzy on what I showed on Monday, but essentially if we go back to this page is going to allow the user, once they click on add lexicons, a button up here, they're going to be told to choose a manual process or an import process to enter their lexicon data. If you click the manual process, you'll be directed to entering the lexicon information, then attribute information, then references information, and then it will loop back through if you want to add additional attributes or additional references. For the import, it's going to look the same up front. It's going to have that lexicon information because this is just a couple inputs, but then it's going to be different on the next screen. It's going to have an import feature for a file down here. And so we start out with that add pages component showing the two options for manual and import, so those two buttons. And then if they choose manual, they'll come to this, and if they choose import, they'll come to this component, or this component will be rendered. And you'll see that these are exactly the same as of right now. I wanted to keep them separate because of them being two separate workflows. But if I end up not changing anything within these two files, I might collapse them back in to the same file again, but then have different outlets being or different components being put within that outlet down here. But let's take a look at the actual component that renders this portion of the web app right here, this import feature. So the first thing we're doing is getting the lexicon and some of the helper functions, or some of the functions to actually set states within the component above the parent component. So lexicon, modify lexicon, set attribute count, and some of those are more relevant for the flavor wheel. Specifically, the attribute count will be important for the rendering the flavor wheel. But then lexicon is going to be utilized for generating the table. We have a data tables column state being set, a user data state being set, and a file selected data state being set. The file selected is going to be used down here to determine if the default or post-upload rendering should occur. So this is going to be the default down here. It's just the instructions with the input. We see a file input down here and all the instructions right here. And then after it's uploaded, then this will be returned, which is the same thing, but with a data table component. And you see that there's some, that data table column state and the user state being passed as props within that data table component. But that's going to be within that change handler function. So let's go back up here. We saw a little bit of this on Monday with the parser that takes the event, which is the click or the file change, file upload, takes that file, parses it from CSV into JSON, and then it's going to run all this down here when it's complete. So the first thing it does is set the file selected to true. So then that specific rendering will occur for post uploading. And then the set user data is going to be set to the results.data. That's going to look like this over here. It's going to be an array, and particularly for if I upload one right now that's different than that one, we're going to have an array. This one was 39, and it has objects as each element within the array, and those objects have properties with values. Those values correspond to the cell rows, and the properties correspond to the headers within the columns. So we'll actually see that with the rendering of the data table down here. So we have the header column names up here, and then we have the rows, which is going to be each row is going to be a reference with this specific format that I'm having the user upload. So I'm trying to make this a minimal feature, so I'm going to be very strict with what my users can upload at first. So it's got to be a CSV, it has to be references as rows, and it has to have these specific columns. So I specified that here. I do need to be a little bit more verbose about the references as rows though. Going back to the code, we're going to set a columns data array to empty, and then we're going to go over the object keys for that results data JSON. So that's going to be the column names, which is what we're going to do for each here. If the expected column names does contain the column name, so there's an expected value that is the column name, which we have the expected names up here, then it's going to push on the columns data this object, which is going to be the name, a selector, and wrap. The name is just the name of the column, which is straightforward. The selector is going to be the selector that's used within the objects to get the value for that particular column. So it would be row.modality for this, row.attribute for the glossiness value, and so on and so forth. But we're going to push that to the columns data, and we're going to set data table columns with that data. And then that's going to be important down here when we pass data table columns and then that JSON user data into the data table columns component. From that, it'll generate this table. You'll see that it is got pages, and it also has the ability to change how many rows are being displayed. And you'll see rows are as dense as it can be vertically, and also that there's alternating colors for the rows. So those are all properties of this data table component that I'm using from the React data table component library. Data table is a library, I think, that's used within jQuery, and I've used it in the past with making web apps within R, and I like it because it can just make very interactive, but very easy to interact with tables up front without having to make all this these properties for updating the data table and the CSS and all that different kind of stuff. So it's pretty out of the box for what I'm trying to do. And that's pretty much it for the data table. If we just step over here real quick, the flavor wheel is over here, and I actually liked having it on this page because it shows all the attributes that we have, because each attribute is going to have multiple references. So this data table is actually going to be much longer than the number of attributes that we have because of each attribute having multiple references. So up here we probably have like 20 or maybe like 10 teens number of attributes in this flavor wheel. And that gives a user a picture of, okay, did my attributes actually upload correctly? And then if they need to go into specifics of looking at the specific columns and the specific references, then they can search through this data table as well. So it gives them a higher level overview of all the attributes that they uploaded, but also they can go into details of what they uploaded here as well. And that flavor wheel, I think I might have covered this before, but this is essentially being rendered with the flavor wheel builder at the parent component level. So it's using lexicon and attribute count to re-render that data table component. So if we start this page over again, it's just going to be a black circle, and then if we upload, we will see that the attributes are now there. And so I have some logic and stuff down here that actually does a lot of that. None of this is really that new, so I'm not going to go over it because these were things that I did with the manual process as well. I guess the only thing that really is new is checking on additional reloads. If the user decides, oh, I didn't want to upload that lexicon, I want to upload this lexicon, then, which that was not different, then this will upload properly. And I specifically have this method now within the lexicon object to clear the attributes array when they actually upload something. And that's looking to see if the lexicon already has attributes to actually do that. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. So if you have any questions, let me know. Going forward, I'm going to be doing streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays on Twitch from 3:30 to 6:30 Pacific Standard Time. So if you're interested in hanging out while I continue working on this project, then definitely feel free to drop in and feel free to chat with me. But yeah, that's all I have. So if you're coming to the stream tomorrow, then I will see you guys tomorrow.